from the beginning of the Haggadah right through, we have to feel as if we are just leaving Egypt. And the truth is, this idea also explains something very strange we do in the Haggadah. Because if I were to ask you, which parshiot in the Chumash would I include in the Haggadah? If I want to discuss the exodus of the Egypt, so where would I look in the Chumash? Shmot. I would look in the Exodus, right? And I would cut and paste basically big chunks of Shmot, Va'era, both those sections of the Torah which discuss the Exodus, and that's what I would include here. And I would, expound upon each phrase, etc., etc. But when we want to discuss the Exodus of Egypt and what happened to us there, we don't really take the chunks and the sections from Shmot. Where do we take those sections? Dvarim. Where in Dvarim specifically? Very good. I actually gave a Chumashim. I didn't take one for myself.
No, we did it over the section. I think it's section 26.
So if
3, 4, 5, and 6.
It's in Devarim, chapter 26, verse 5. In the Chumash, it's on page 1068. And those who want to follow in the Haggadah, it's in the Magid. It's right after Vihisha Amda. If you find Vihisha Amda, it's the next page. Sorry, no, it's not. Yes, it is. It's right after Vihisha Amda. What is this section? Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayma Vayagar Sham Bimtei Ma'at. What is this section here? Anyone?
What's it about?
Yeah, what's it about?
First one about Lavan, isn't it?
Yeah, but what's it doing here? What's it doing here in the Chumash here? So this is talking about the first fruits. For those who have the Chumash, it's the Bikurim, the first fruits that grow in the land of Israel, of the 7 species. You bring up to the Beit HaMikdash and you offer them before you bring them to the Beit HaMikdash. And you have this Kriya. You announce that the Jewish history is a lengthy one, and you go back and you start discussing, and you talk about how when we were in Egypt, and even before Egypt, etc., etc., etc. But why use this? Why don't we go to Shmot? Why don't we use those chunks from the Exodus? Why are we flipping to here to find our history in Egypt? So Rabbi Yitzchak Mursky, this is actually his Haggadah, he points out a very interesting point. And that is, if we look at the verses, and specifically it would be really from verse 5, if you have the Chumash, V'anita v'amarti v'fnei Hashem Elokecha arami oved avi, and then verse 6, V'yareu otanu hamitzrim, we were oppressed, V'yanunu, V'yitnu aleinu avodah kasha, and they placed burdensome work upon us, V'nitzak el Hashem, and we cried out to God. Right? What tense is this?
The past. First person.
First person. That's what I was looking for. I don't. Tense wasn't the right word, but this is all in the first person. If you go to the Exodus, nothing's in the first person. It's all in the third person. It's talking about what happened to the Bnei Israel. But if you look here, this is all in the first person. Rav Mursky says that's why we go to. That's one of the reasons why we go to this parsha, because part of Pesach night is that it's the first person. We are experiencing it tonight. And therefore it's true. It's the same story here as it is in the Exodus. In fact, in the Exodus is where it happened. Here we're just saying what happened. But we use these verses because these are in the first person. It really emphasizes the same idea.
There's no Moshe.
There's also no Moshe here, which, if we have time, maybe we'll get back to a little bit later. But that's correct. It's a great point. There's no Moshe in these psukim. Okay, now for those who are following along the Haggadah, let's flip to the end. We're done. Let's go to the end. What's the end? What's the last section of the Haggadah?
Haggadah.
Which
What's the last section? What's it called? I heard someone say it's the songs, right? Nirtza. It's called Nirtza, and it's the songs. And the truth is, I believe there are customs that actually end the Haggadah at the end of Hallel and don't actually include Nirtza. But the vast majority of us, I believe, definitely include the songs. What are the songs all about? For those who get to that part in the Seder, what are the songs all about? So let's start. If you have the Haggadah, go flip to Nirtza. What do we do right at the beginning? We say we've done the Seder, we've done as the best of our ability. We think we've performed all the laws as we should. May we merit next year to fulfill all the laws in Yerushalayim. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. And the truth is, if you flip a page to the next song, Uvechein vayehi b'chatzi halayla, and it was at midnight. And there's a whole poem here discussing things that happened at midnight. Of course, one of the things that happened at midnight was the final plague, Makat Bechorot, the death of the firstborns of Egypt, happened exactly at midnight. But we discussed many other instances in Jewish history where midnight was key. One of them being Achashverosh. Achashverosh in the Purim story woke up in the middle of the night. He had this bad dream and he said, "Bring the book, let me read about what happened." And that's where he read about Mordechai, etc., etc. But if you go to the end of the song, what do we talk about? The ultimate geula, the final redemption, the redemption with the coming of Mashiach. Karev yom asher hu lo yom v'lo laila, shomrim hafki li'ircha. We discuss the future redemption, not the redemption of Egypt, but the redemption we are all awaiting. And the truth is, you flip to a couple songs later, Adir hu yivne beito bekarov. The whole song is about yivne beito bekarov. What are we referring to? Yivne beito bekarov. May he build his house speedily. May he build his house, referring to the temple, very, very quickly. And the question really is, how does this fit into Pesach night? I mean, is this really relevant to the 15th of Nisan, to the night the time we left Egypt? I mean, why don't we just focus on leaving Egypt? Perhaps Kriyat Yamsuf, splitting the sea, but why do we keep talking about the Shana Haba Yerushalayim? Why do we keep talking about Yivne Beito V'Karo, building the temple? I mean, these are nice concepts, but is this the time for them?
Well, I mean, wasn't the exodus from Egypt the first step in the ultimate redemption? I mean, everything since then has been a progression towards Mashiach.
Correct, and that's really the idea that clearly the Haggadah is trying to get us to keep in mind, that the redemption is not completed. But I think we could expand upon this idea. I think there's really a lot more to it, and really to understand the idea, we have to look at the structure of the Haggadah. What's the structure of the Haggadah? The Talmud tells us the Haggadah should be matchil bignut u'mesayim b'shvach. Begin with the derogatory comments, our nation as a downtrodden nation, and mesayim b'shvach. End off on an upswing as we've done great. So what does that mean exactly? So there's actually a machloket. There's actually a debate in the Talmud what exactly that means. According to one opinion, that means we start off by avadim hayinu the paro b'mitzrayim, we were slaves, and we basically end off, God took us out. That's one opinion, which makes a lot of sense. The other opinion is that no, we don't start off with being slaves in Egypt. We go way before that. We start off that our ancestors were idol worshippers. The father of Abraham, Terach, worshipped idols. Right? That's where we start. That's the lowest part. That's the lowest point in Jewish history. Terach Avi Avraham. Now where do we go till? Where's the end? That's the low point. Where's the high point?
Receiving the Torah.
Receiving the Torah. Very good. The Rambam says, don't stop at leaving Egypt. That's not the high point. The high point is the purpose of leaving Egypt. The purpose of leaving Egypt. Tavdu et Elokim al ha'arazeh, that will serve Hashem on this mountain at the receiving of the Torah. That's where we should stop. And the truth is, I think that's perhaps another answer to why we use this parsha of Devarim, the parsha of Bikurim, as opposed to the parsha in Exodus. Because how does it end over here? If you have the Chumash, it's pasuk tet. In the Haggadah, the last pasuk that's quoted, how does it end? It doesn't end, we got out of Egypt. It ends, Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh, that God brought us to this land. We go way past the Exodus from Egypt. We go till that end. We go till God brought us to Eretz Yisrael, because we can't stop there. We can't stop at the Exodus from Egypt. We have to go to that next step. Why? Why do we go so far? Why can't we stop with the Exodus? I mean, that is what the night's about. It's about the Exodus. Is it not? Isn't that what made us free men? I mean, it really could have stopped when we got out, no?
Well, receiving the Torah made us even freer.
It made us freer. That's the key, 100%. And the truth is, if you look, Sefer Shmot, the Ramban, the Gemara is called Sefer Shmot. Anyone? Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption. Now, if I was writing the book of redemption, I would have started it with Sefer Shmot, but where would I have ended? When the Jews got out of Egypt. Right? That would be the book of redemption. But if you look, Sefer Shmot, what do we have in Sefer Shmot? We have the Exodus from Egypt, but then what's the whole end of Sefer Shmot all about? Anyone? If you have a Chumash, you could check it out. What's the last few parshiot in Sefer Shmot? Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakel, Pekudei. What are these parshiot all about? Very good, thank you. The Mishkan. Building the Mishkan. Bringing God's presence into this world. Having a place for God to rest His Shekhinah in this world. How is that related to Geula? Why would the Ramban coin the Sefer HaGeula? So the Ramban asks this question. And he explains that, as we've mentioned, Geula can't end with the Exodus from Egypt. What makes us freer, as you say, is getting the Torah. The purpose of the Exodus from Egypt is to lead us to that mountain, to get the Torah. We can't end the Sefer HaGeula before we get there. And I think that's why we can't end Exodus with leaving Egypt, and I think that's why why on the Seder night we must go further. We must go further. We must talk about Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh, that He brought us to this land. And we must talk about how our current state, we don't have the Mikdash. We pray and we yearn that we will have the Mikdash. But we can't just mention Geulat Mitzrayim, the redemption of Egypt, without the recognition that the Geula is not complete. That it's true. We got from point A to point B. And we did have the Eretz Yisrael, we had the Mikdash for a while. But now we're no longer in that state. And therefore all the songs, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, if you look at the bracha at the end of the Magid, what's the bracha at the end of the Magid? Magid, you would think, is the one time we really are only focusing on Egypt. But no, if you have the Haggadah, if you flip to the last bracha in Magid, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, thank you for redeeming us from Egypt. You brought us to this night where we could eat matzah, we could eat maror, and Kain Hashem Elokeinu. So you should bring us in the future to other holidays where we could celebrate Bibinyan Irecha and the rebuilding of your city. Sasim ba'avodatecha. We will eat the karbanot, we will eat the sacrifices. Even the bracha on the Magid, which is really focused on the 15th of Nisan. What happened on that day? The Exodus from Egypt. Even in that bracha, we throw in this idea because the Geula cannot be complete without the recognition of our current state and our yearning for that future Geula. And in fact, this isn't necessarily the time for a greater discussion on this, but the truth is, really every time throughout the year that we mention one of the Geulot, one of our redemptions, and we thank God for our redemption, we really should and we really do try to emphasize His other Yeshua, the times He saved us before, and the mention that the recognition that we're not saved just yet, and we pray and yearn for that future redemption. If you have, I don't have a siddur in front of me. If anyone has a siddur, it's okay, you don't have to get. If you look at the Ma'oz Tzur that we sing on Hanukkah, after we light the Hanukkah candles, there's a custom to sing Ma'oz Tzur. Ma'oz Tzur is not just it is a nice song, but it's not just a song that some guy 50 years ago wrote. Ma'oz Tzur was written in the mid-13th century. Okay, this goes back some time. What is Ma'oz Tzur all about? If you look at the translation of Ma'oz Tzur, what do we say? So obviously we're going to mention Hanukkah. That's the time of year, and we mentioned that God saved us when our religious lives were at stake. But we don't only mention Hanukkah. We mention the other Geulot, the other redemptions. We mention Purim. We mention how we were about to be annihilated, and God saved us Purim time. We mention Mitzrayim even. We go back to Egypt, and we say that Paro was attacking us, and God saved us. But how do we conclude Ma'oz Tzur? With a prayer for the future. Chasov Zroa Kadshecha, the Karev Kates HaYeshua. We pray for that final Yeshua, the final redemption, because again, each time that we're thanking God for one redemption, we mention the fact that in our current state, we are not completely redeemed, and we pray and we yearn for that redemption. And this Rav Meir Twersky, one of the Rosh Yeshiva from IU, explained that this really explains a custom that many of us have on Seder night. After we eat the matzah, after we read the whole Magid, we eat the matzah, we eat the maror, we're ready to start our meal. I don't know if you'll find this in many Haggadot, but there's a custom which I think many people have. And that's to eat a special food. What food do we eat before we begin the meal?
An egg.
An egg. And this custom is an old custom. It's quoted in the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, 16th century. We eat an egg. Why does the Ramah say to eat an egg? Anyone? Actually, a whole bunch of reasons given. But one of the reasons that the Ramah notes is because this night of Pesach, this year Pesach is Monday night, the first night of Pesach. Monday night is also the night of Tisha B'Av. We fast forward, it's the same night of the week, and therefore we remind ourselves of that connection. And the truth is, there are those who created a mnemonic to really remember all the holidays of the year with this. That there's a gematria called Atbash. What's Atbash? It's that the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet corresponds to the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So you have Aleph and Taf. That's At. Then you have Bet and Shin, right? Bash. And it continues. So how do they use that? So Aleph refers to Aleph being one. The first night of Pesach is Taf, which is Tisha B'Av. Bet, the second night of Pesach, is the Shin being Shavuot, the day of Shavuot. If you want to know, if you lose your calendar, it's a good way of remembering. It's going to be the second night of Pesach. Gimel, the third night of Pesach, is, work backwards, Reish. What's Reish? Rosh Hashanah. It continues if you want. Daled, the fourth night, is Kuf, which is Kriyat HaTorah, referring to Simchat Torah. Hey, the fifth night would be Sadi, which is Tzom, fast, Yom Kippur. And if you want to go one more, Vav refers to Pei, which would be Purim of the year. So it corresponds. But does that really explain why we eat an egg? No, thank you. Right? I mean, it's cute and like it's nice, I guess. But why do we eat the egg?
Egg usually symbolizes life.
So egg symbolizes life, but which is why we eat eggs when we're in mourning, the roundness, the circle of life. And that's why the Ramah said to eat the egg as a sign of mourning for Tisha B'Av. But why are we mourning? This is when we got out of Egypt. That doesn't really explain anything. It's true, it'll be the same night. So if you want to know when Tisha B'Av is this year, it's going to be Monday night. Tisha B'Av will start Monday night. But why do we eat the egg? And I think, based on our idea, I think it really clarifies this. We're eating the egg because we're recognizing that it's true. We left Egypt, but that's not the end. We still don't have a Beit HaMikdash. We still are in mourning. We had one redemption, but we didn't have a final redemption, and therefore we cannot claim to be totally free men. It's true, we're supposed to be experiencing freedom and royalty, etc., all the ideas we talked about. But in the back of our minds, just like that bride and groom at the wedding, Imlo Ale at Yerushalayim al Rosh Simchati, we break the glass at the wedding because our simcha isn't complete. Perhaps on some level, even on Pesach night, when you don't think we should be, talking about mourning at all, that's not something that's going to enter the conversation at our table. Nonetheless, we have that custom of eating the egg to recognize this, because the geula is one step in the process, but the complete geula has not yet occurred. And this idea, I think, the idea that the recognition that we're anticipating future redemptions and the ultimate redemption perhaps may explain something which we read right at the beginning of the Haggadah, right at the beginning of the Seder, and really a custom which some of us may have even begun already. Again, going back to the first thing we read before the Avadim Hayinu, the introduction to the Seder, we had that passage in Aramaic. What was the passage all about? What did we say? Someone want to summarize it for us? The Halach Ma'anya. What's the gist of the Halach Ma'anya?
Inviting guests to come in.
Inviting guests to come in. We invite guests to come in. Anyone who needs a meal, come on down. Right? We're not going to call you before Yom Tov. We'll wait till Yom. But we invite you in, and how does it close? What do we end off? That Hashata Hacha, this year we're here, L'shana haba ba'arad Yisrael. Next year we yearn, next year we shall be in the Holy Land of Israel, as free men. I mean, why tonight? It's a very nice gesture, don't get me wrong. I'm pro Hachnasat Orchim. I think we should invite people in. But why Pesach night? I mean, we don't, the first night of Sukkot, we don't walk into our sukkah and say, making a public announcement here, if anyone needs a meal, feel free to come on in. We don't do that. The other holidays, we don't do it. So why Pesach night? Before Pesach night, we're the busiest. We have so many other mitzvot to keep us occupied. We have the mitzvot of matzah and maror and the 4 cups. We have tons of mitzvot this night. This is the night we decide, we're going to be hospitable. We're going to extend our homes. What are we doing? What's this all about?
Trying to be free.
Sorry?
We're trying to be free because we're technically still slaves.
We're trying to be free because we're technically still slaves. Okay. I mean, it's true. And this makes us free because we have the power to invite other people in. Okay. I mean,
even in Al-Asmani it says, even after all of that, it says, now we are here, next year we will be in the land of Israel, now we are slaves, next year we will be free men. So even after it's introduced the whole idea of leaving Egypt, being redeemed, it comes back at the end and says, next year may we be free in Jerusalem. So we're still saying we're slaves.
Correct. We are still slaves. And the truth is, I think the underlying idea that paragraph is really getting at is what we talked about until now. That no matter how free we are from Egypt, we're still not in Israel. What does that mean, we're still not in Israel? People who live in Israel, do they say that paragraph? Yes, because there's no Beit HaMikdash. That's not the end. That's not the final idea. And the truth is, there's this overemphasis on charity around Pesach. It's not only this paragraph, right? There's an old custom of ma'ot chitin. What's ma'ot chitin? That before Pesach, we give money to the poor to buy wheat, or now to buy matzah, basically. And the truth is, it's a great thing to do, but why specific Pesach? Again, this isn't a custom throughout we give charity throughout the year, but there's an overemphasis on charity specifically on Pesach, yeah?
Isn't it the concept of tzedakah making us free?
So it's true. I mean, that's what was mentioned. That it's true. Tzedakah makes us free. It shows that we're giving something that, this is ours and we can choose what to do. But I think I just want to share with, and I think those ideas are definitely, it's definitely correct.
Maybe it has to do with like the royalty. Like when you're bringing your people in, it's like, in a sense, it's like the freedom or whatever. But and also with the tzedakah, you're acting as if you're in a position. Well, like obviously given the fact that maybe you are, because if you're not, then you can't. But giving you a position that you can give it, then maybe you should give it more. Just because right now we're trying to act as if we're in that position, a higher position than we usually are.
Correct. I think you're 100% right, and I think these are all part of it, right? It's this overemphasis on royalty, on freedom, on showing that we're free men. I just want to share with you a comment that the Beis Halevi lived in the 19th century. He was, for those of you who've heard of Rav Soloveitchik, he was Rav Soloveitchik's great-grandfather. He had the same name as Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik. And the Beis Halevi points to a verse in Tanakh, in Yeshaya. And the verse says, Shimru mishpat, ve'asu tzedakah, ki krova yeshuati lavo. What do those words mean? Again, Shimru mishpat, ve'asu tzedakah, and perform tzedakah, charity, ki krova yeshuati lavo, because my Yeshua, my redemption is close. And the Beis Halevi quotes this pasuk, and he notes that charity specifically is intertwined with the Geula. Charity specifically has the power to bring about the redemption. It's the ideas that you're mentioning. It's that I'm giving what's mine. I'm giving what I worked for. I'm giving it to those who are in need. And it's that idea of charity that has the power to bring about the redemption. And therefore we fill Pesach night not only the days prior to Pesach, but even the first thing we say on Pesach night is that my house is open. And it's true. You should have said that a week ago and called people and invited them in, those who need it. But we want to emphasize that idea. We want to make it clear that charity is something that we're doing. And the truth is, I want to share with you a story about the Beis Halevi. He didn't just say this. The story really emphasizes that he personified this. This is how he lived. We mentioned before that we drink 4 cups of wine on this night. 4 cups of wine, 4 cups of grape juice, which could act as a substitute according to some. You could ask your rabbi about that one. But it says in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, if one can't afford or doesn't have wine, grape juice, there's no substitute. What about Chamar Medina? What is Chamar Medina? Chamar Medina is a drink of some significance in the country. So for Kiddush, for example, on Shabbat, if you don't have wine, you don't have grape juice, one would be allowed in that situation to make Kiddush on beer, orange juice, tea perhaps, drinks that are of some significance. Again, meaning as opposed to like a Coke or a water or something like that. Again, we're not talking, how we judge what's actually significant and what's not. It's not necessarily a science, but again, in situations, it's not the optimal situation, but one could make Kiddush on that. So this woman approached the Beis Halevi and said, can I use milk for the 4 cups, for the Daled Kosot on Pesach night? I can't afford wine, I don't have any substitutes, can I use milk for the 4 cups? What did the Beis Halevi say? What's the answer? Sorry?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I was reading, I saw there's a sefer that called Shut Mimamakim. Shut, or responsa, Mimamakim, from the depths. These were questions that were asked to Rav Ashri, who was in the Kovna ghetto during the Holocaust. And they were asking him halakhic questions, and these were his responses. So they asked him in the Kovna ghetto during the Holocaust, can we use tea for the 4 cups on Pesach night? And he responded, absolutely. That's, again, it's a terrible situation, but if one finds themselves in that situation, they could. And therefore the Beis Halevi said absolutely to this woman, you can use milk for the 4 cups on Pesach night. But then as she was leaving, he handed her a large sum of money. Much more than was needed just to go and buy grape juice or wine for the 4 cups. And after she left, those around the Beis Halevi asked him, I understand she clearly needed money, but why did you give her so much? Why didn't you just give her a bottle of wine or give her enough money to go buy the wine? And the Beis Halevi said that my job as the rabbi isn't just to answer questions, it's to see beyond the question. What's the answer to her question? Can I use milk? The answer is yes. You can definitely use milk. But this woman clearly knows that you can't have milk and meat at the same meal. If she's asking, could I use milk for the 4 cups, she clearly can't afford meat. Chicken, she's not eating anything at the meal. And therefore it's true, I could have just given her wine, and that would have answered her question. But you have to see beyond the question. And Pesach specifically, sometimes charity, it's not only about writing a check, but it's about being smart. It's about looking beyond the question and seeing what she really needs. And that's what that woman really needed. And that's what the Beis Halevi did. Moving on, you mentioned that perhaps I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but Alana mentioned that perhaps one of the reasons why we use these verses in Devarim is that there's no Moshe, right? And the truth is, that's really one of the fascinating points that we find in the Haggadah. It's not only about what we do read, it's also about what we don't read. And if I was writing a history book about the Jews' exodus from Egypt, there'd be a nice big chapter on Moshe. Moshe's character, Moshe's leadership, right? What Moshe represented, how he acted towards us. And we go through the Haggadah, we spend the whole night, and perhaps we're occupied in what there is here, that we don't necessarily focus on what there isn't here. But what there isn't here is Moshe. Moshe doesn't get mentioned on Pesach night. How can it be? How can that be that we're writing the history of the Jews leaving Egypt and we just left the leader out? The truth is, you'll catch me. Most of our Haggadahs actually do have the word Moshe in it. He is mentioned once tangentially. We'll get back to it in a second. But in terms of who Moshe was, what his personality was, his character, his leadership, his attributes, nothing. And the Vilna Gaon explains that on Pesach night, we emphasize the notion that it was God, and God alone, who took us out of Egypt. As we read, Lo al yedei malach, lo al yedei saraf, el hakadosh baruch hu ba'atzmo. This was God. Everything that happened, it was God. Make no mistake. And therefore, says the Vilna Gaon, we can't bring Moshe into the equation. Why can't we bring Moshe into the equation? Because it's true. If we were to bring Moshe into the equation, we would need a big chapter about Moshe. We would need to talk about Moshe as a person and Moshe as a leader and how he grew up to be this leader and his family, etc. There would be a nice portion of the Haggadah devoted to Moshe, and perhaps on some level it would take away from the emphasis that this was totally HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This was Lo Yedei Malach, Lo Yedei Saraf. This was no one else but God. Our allegiance on this night switched over from being Avdei Paro, from being slaves to Pharaoh, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God. And there's nothing in between. And therefore, says the Vilna Gaon, that's why Moshe is left out. And the truth is, what's the one time that we have Moshe in our Haggadah? So it's totally tangentially. We're quoting a verse, and the word Moshe happens to be in it. But what's the verse? Vaya'aminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. That when the Jews crossed the river, when the sea split, Vaya'aminu b'Hashem, they believed in God, u'v'Moshe avdo. And in Moshe, his servant. The one time we do mention Moshe, we give him the title servant of God. We make it very clear that it's true. We're mentioning Moshe, but he's still Moshe Avdo. He is Moshe, the servant of God. This was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This was God. You had a question? Or?
Yeah, it just strikes me ironic that the other time where we don't mention, let's say someone, because when we read the Megillah, God isn't mentioned. So on one hand, we're trying to somewhat hide God, and here we're reading the Haggadah and we're trying to emphasize him and not emphasize Moshe. It's de-emphasize Moshe.
It's a great point. I mean, I think the simple answer, and this doesn't do it justice, I'm giving you a quick answer just to move on, and maybe after this year we could talk a little bit longer. I think the simple answer is just that the holidays are really about two totally different ideas, and the whole idea of Purim, we could talk about this at length, the whole idea of Purim from start to finish is about Hester Panim, is about God not being around. And that's not only in the fact that God's name isn't mentioned in the Haggadah, but it's really, in the Megillah, but it's really about how all of the Nisim, all of the miracles that transpired in the Megillah were totally hidden, and everything was happening in the natural sequence of events, and therefore the conclusion we draw is that God is hidden. Right. Whereas here it's about the exact opposite. Yeah. It's about the grandeur, the miracles, everything is big, right? Everything is open, and that idea, I think there's a lot more to talk about, but I think we'll move on for now.
I don't remember where exactly you said that the Psukim and Dvarim recorded that are in Haggadah, but isn't Moshe saying it? Like, isn't he the one giving it over? Because for the last half of Dvarim, he's the one talking.
No. But if you read the Psukim, Moshe's name doesn't appear. Meaning, this is about the mitzvah of Bikurim. This is about when a Jew brings his fruits up to the temple, what he's supposed to say. It's true. How do we know he's supposed to say that? Because Moshe told the Jewish people that these are the mitzvot that you have to follow. But it has nothing to do with the verses that are quoted. The verses that are quoted is just a recount of the historical background of the Jewish people and how they were in Egypt. And I just want to continue with this idea, our allegiance to God, because I think this is really another major theme on Pesach. Why do we eat matzah on Pesach? Why don't we eat bread like the rest of the year?
To remind us that when we left Egypt, we didn't have time to allow the bread to...
Great answer. And the truth is that the Torah tells us that, right? The Torah tells us when we left Egypt, we didn't have time for the bread to rise, and therefore to remind us of that, we eat matzah. The problem is, it's not 100% true. What do I mean it's not 100% true? When did we leave Egypt? Well, we left on the 15th of Nisan, that we know. What time of day? We left
after midnight.
Early morning.
We left during the day. We left midday. We left Chatzot Hayom. But the night before, we ate the Korban Pesach. Mm-hmm. We ate the Korban Pesach with matzah, right? So, and how do we eat the matzah that night? What does the Torah tell us about eating matzah that night? We ate it b'chipazon. We ate it in a rush. We ate it in a rush. We had our shoes on. We had our belts fastened. We were holding our walking stick. We were ready to go. And then what happened?
We waited.
We finished the meal.
We waited around.
And we waited around. And we didn't leave till the next day. Right? There's plenty of time. What are we in a rush? What is this notion of chipazon, of being rushed? And that's what matzah is all about, right? The difference between matzah and chametz is the time difference, right? Matzah, there's a limited amount of time that the wheat, the flour, and the water could be mixed in before it's baked. But what's the rush? And I think this idea of chipazon, of being rushed, is as follows. A slave does not have time of his own. When you're a slave, there's no such thing as, I'm on break now. When the master says, please, I need you to do X, you do X. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. A slave doesn't have time of his own. That's what a slave is. And I think the episode of leaving Egypt was rushed to show that we still do not have time of our own. Because it's easy to make that mistake that, we were slaves, we did not have time of our own, but now we're free. Now we can relax. Now we can do whatever we want. We have our own time. And I think, therefore, God instructs us, even before we left Egypt, the night before, you have to eat this meal in a rush. You have to do it exactly as I tell you. Don't be laid back about it. Don't think you have all the time in the world. No, I am telling you, you have to do this quickly. You have to do this. Matzah, you have 18 minutes to bake it. That's it. Time is not yours. Because what happened that night and that day when we left Egypt? Our allegiance transferred. Our allegiance transferred from being slaves to Paro to being servants of God. Now it's true. God isn't sitting there with a whip oppressing us like it was in Egypt. But we're not free men to do what we choose. We're servants. We're servants of God. And that's why time is constricted. That's why each aspect of time, God says, I am still in charge. And if we utilize our time towards Avodat Hashem, towards serving God, I think that's really what Pesach is all about. Pesach is about recognizing that we're not free. We're still avadim. We're still slaves on some level. Again, it's a totally different type of servitude. And it's not something we should be upset about. It's not restricting. But we're not free to do whatever we want. And this idea that time is our most precious commodity, something which we can never get back, I think is another main theme that we find on Pesach. Yeah.
Now I want to say that when we were slaves, we were not happy. We had to do what we were told. But when we were free, in a sense, we were happy to be servants to Hashem, which to me is different than although we had to do a work, it was a happy type of work. So it's a contradiction that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is 100% right. We're not talking about the same type of servitude at all. But I think that's the idea, and I think that's why everything was rushed. Even before we were rushing, right? We could have had a nice meal, taken our time, gone out the next day. But the idea of being rushed is to show that God is telling us you're being rushed because you're transferring your allegiance. I see the time is running out. I want to conclude with one last thought. And this is in the name of Rav Asher Weiss. He lives in Yerushalayim. Kriyat Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. We all know one of the greatest miracles, the greatest open miracles to occur. In front of everyone. We all saw it. And the number of miracles that happened during the sea with us going through and the Egyptians drowning, and according to some 12 different paths for each of the tribes, and walls were see-through, we could watch it. It's unbelievable. But Rav Asher Weiss asked a simple question. What's the big deal? If I believe God created the world and created the sea, is it so miraculous for him to split the sea? Right? I mean, if I think about it for a second, we all say every day we believe that God created the world. If we believe that, and we truly believe that, so God created everything. He created the raging sea. Is it such a big deal for him to split the sea that he created? And he presents a mashal, a parable, and I think it's a very, very powerful mashal. A craftsman creates a beautiful statue. He creates a statue of a horse. It's a beautiful horse. I don't know if it's made of wood or stone, but it's a beautiful, beautiful horse. He works years and years on this horse, and he thinks it's perfect. What does he do? He doesn't want to keep the horse by himself in his store so no one can see it. So he moves it out to the town square for everyone to see and appreciate his handiwork. And he moves it out, and he's standing there next to this horse, waiting for the crowds to come by in awe and say, wow, you made this horse? And guess what? Nobody comes by. No one even gives him a second glance. People are walking by as if he's not even there. And he doesn't understand. This masterpiece. There's never been such a beautiful statue. How could it be that no one even stops by? And then he realized his statue was too good. His statue was so perfect that people thought there was a man standing with a horse. Why would I stop by if there's a man standing there with a horse? His statue was so perfect that people paid no attention to it. So what did he do? He took a sword, and while people were walking by, and he split the horse in half. He cut the horse in half. And people saw, oh my gosh, that was a statue? That wasn't a real horse? I thought that was a real horse. That's unbelievable. That's beautiful. That's so perfect. Rav Asher said, that is what Kriyas Yam Suf is all about. It's true. It's not such a big deal for God who created the world to split and created the sea to go ahead and split it. But the sea was too perfect. The world is too perfect. Too perfect in a sense that sometimes we don't open our eyes. It's too perfect. We don't realize, wow, that is a creation of God. That is God's handiwork. And therefore, once in a while, and specifically around the time of the Exodus from Egypt, God had to split the horse. He had to split it for us to realize, wow, this is God's work. God created this, and God can split it. And I think this is another idea, another theme which we have to pay attention to on the holiday. The holiday where we read about these great and awesome miracles. The miracles which were out there for everyone to see. We have to take that down to our everyday lives. It's true, the miracles are great and awesome. But we have to recognize that the same way it's a great miracle for the sea to split, so too, for a tree to blossom, and for a sun to rise, and for a baby to breathe, and everything else that happens to us on a daily basis, these too are miracles. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.